everybody, welcome back to Storytellers. Scott here. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully you enjoyed the first part of the series. And if there's one thing that I was going to talk about today for the second part, is going to be on the topic of transformation. Um, uh, when I was kind of talking a little bit about yesterday about the turmoil I was going through, just kind of inward turmoil, a lot of stuff that was going on in my life, in my childhood. Um, there came a point where I really started to see transformation. Um, Around this time, probably about sixth, seventh grade, kind of at the pinnacle of that turmoil. That's when my dad decided he was going to start attending church again. Probably when I was around in first grade, my family left the church, mainly due to some of the reasons I outlined in the first video, with my grandfather and even some of the church people that were some of the church people weren't being very nice church people, and my dad kind of declared all church people are hypocrites, and we left the church for about 5 years. So about sixth grade, I remember my dad started going back to church, and he kept asking me, hey, actually I think about fifth grade he started going back to church. It wasn't until sixth grade where I really started to go regularly. My dad asked me if I want to go to church. I kept saying no, no, no. Eventually he says, okay, this is the last time you can say no. Then next Sunday you're coming to church. So he dragged me to church, as I like to say. He dragged me to church, got involved in kind of the kids ministry, or the kids church ministry. And then from there was a ministry fair, and I really didn't want to be an usher or a greeter or any of that. That was old people work, as I would have called it. And then my dad kind of said, well, what about puppets? Do you want to do a puppet ministry? And I'm like, no. And my dad goes, well, you have to do something. So he signs me up against my will. He signs me up for puppet ministry. So I remember starting that in sixth grade and absolutely loved it. Couldn't have asked for better leaders than Tom and Risa Ritterbeck and all the other leaders who were there. The Mel and Becky Schaefer's, all of them were absolutely fantastic. Even the church we were going to, the Talmadge First Church of God, everyone was so nice, everyone was so loving, everyone was so caring. And it wasn't until summer camp where I ended up giving my life to the Lord. I did that in sixth grade. But as I tell the story, the pastor, the evangelist at that camp basically said, well, if you accept Jesus into your heart, he's there forever, he never leaves. And I interpret that as, I can have Jesus in my heart. I won't go to hell if I die. But I can still continue to do all the crude and mean stuff that I was doing. I can still continue to use inappropriate language, be disrespectful to parents and the leaders, still beat up my sister, all those things. Really no transformation, no life change. It wasn't until seventh grade when there was really a life change, and actually kind of in between sixth and seventh grade, I went to International Youth Convention in Phoenix, Arizona. And went there. I remember Steve Green was the worship leader. Kind of the main band that was there was PFR, and I guess they were okay in the CCM circles, but I thought they weren't that great. And I know all the other older youth guys, they loved PFR. I was like, man, this stinks. So I remember they had like a couple tables set up, and there's like a Christian bookstore there, and they had stuff that they were selling, Bibles, books, music. And as I was walking, I happened to see this CD. And the CD on the cover was a yellow cover, and it was like this little tiny guy, nerd, with glasses, with purple hair, and and all the album said was 90-pound Wuss. Had no clue what this was, who 90-pound Wuss was, but I knew at this time I was about 90 pounds. So I'm like, hey, that's me. So I bought the album based off that. And my goodness, I didn't know that I had bought a very Christian, underground, fast, nasty, noisy punk album. Had no clue. But I liked it. I thought it was a good deal because I think at that time, probably paid $17 for it at the store. And there's like 20 songs on there. And I'm like, man, this is a steal. Everyone else is paying $70 for 10 songs. I got 20 songs. So, man, I'm. Of course, I didn't realize that each song was like a minute or two long because they just play so fast. But I love that album, and if there's one thing that could really focus on the transformation part of my life, would have to be there's a song on there called "Daylight Savings Man," and part of my transformation, and I was very arrogant. I would say I would even I would say probably borderline narcissistic sometimes, and I don't know if it was just kind of the culture where it seemed like, growing up, it was always about, well, you got to be a man. And it was more of a society culture where, you have to always feel like you're always right all the time and never show weakness and fear. So you always had to kind of be, you're number one and you have to look out for yourself. So very, very selfish, very narrow focused, I would say. In some ways very presidentially. But in that aspect, a lot of times it was always about me, myself, and I. And I think even when I would do stuff, if people didn't like it, then I would, if people didn't like what I have to say or didn't like what I was doing, well, then I would give them a piece of my mind and really kind of, tear them down, because that's kind of classic, what a classic narcissist would do. And again, I didn't really know this at the time. I'm just kind of looking at this in hindsight. But I think there was a time where when I started going back to church, and really, I know people like to give church a bad rap, but church pretty much saved my life. I think just being around people who loved me, people who had to correct me, but they did it out of very gentleness, love, and respect, did it privately always. It was never someone was going to accuse me of doing something wrong in front of everybody. They always said, hey, can I talk to you? Especially, I think about my youth leader, Lawana. I think she was always rebuking me every day. But I think, in that sense, it kind of helped shape me, and it really helped me deal with a lot of issues. Even after IYC, I began to, and especially when I went to summer camp, 7th grade, went to a different camp, really rededicated my life to Christ. And then really from there, I think 7th grade on, I really began to really focus on, okay, let me go ahead and, take, let me get a Bible. So I went out to a Christian bookstore, bought a Bible, and started reading the Bible and really made that a priority. Started kind of being in prayer more, and even like read books on different ways to pray, because I felt like my prayer life was stagnant. And even now as a 38-year-old man, a lot of times I still think that transformation's still relevant in my life today than it was when I was a teenager. I think a lot of times people get into these traps where it's like, I accept Jesus, I follow him, I go to church every Sunday, and at some point, you're praying, you're reading, you're being involved. But then I think there's a point where you feel like, okay, well, I'm done transforming. And, I'm where I need to be, and all I'm doing is just kind of waiting until Jesus takes me home, which I find that kind of views that theology very dangerous, because, there's a lot of times where there's people who've been in church for years, and there's times where I kind of even question, like, they're not really acting like Christ, and they haven't for a very long time. So part of me questions that. And again, it's not my place to judge one's heart, but there are some genuine concerns, because you just don't really see fruit. You're really not seeing salt and light in that aspect. So, for me, transformation's something that is always something that I'm trying to do, always trying to achieve. And the only way that happens is it's not something that I'm achieving, per se, but it's something that just being connected with Christ, humbling myself before him, and asking him for help, that's kind of where I believe transformation goes. And basically, this is a song that kind of talks about that. About everything that I was feeling. So this is actually a song by 90 Pound Wuss, and this is Daylight Savings Man. And since it's punk, I have to stand up because I'm going to be playing real fast, and I don't want to get a cramp in my arm. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll have a next video up shortly. Take care. Enjoy self-confinement. How about I stop that?